Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Gottesman, Director of Policy and Research for APAC AIF Israel. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by international human rights lawyer and CEO of the International Legal Forum, Arsen Ostrovsky. Arsen is a staunch pro-Israel advocate who works to combat anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel in international forums and on social media. Arsen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Arsen, you lead an organization which is doing important work that seeks to support and strengthen the state of Israel in the international arena. And I'd like to touch on some of those issues, including the UN, BDS, and the broader campaign to delegitimize Israel. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit more about the organization itself, what it seeks to do, who are its members, and what your objectives are.
Sure. The International Legal Forum, it's an Israeli-based, proactive NGO that consists of some 3,500 lawyers around the world in over 40 countries, including the United States, that are leading the fight against anti-Semitism, against the delegitimization of Israel, against BDS and terror, but in the international legal arena as lawyers through the lens of the law. We were started about 5 years ago, primarily because of the understanding that Israel is facing challenges on many different battlefronts, but especially the legal battlefront, that we are under legal assault, anti-Semitism, terror through the UN and other places. So we need to be able to not only respond to that, but what's I think most powerful is that the law also gives us the opportunity to change the paradigm. So not only be able to respond in real time to the threats and challenges, which are many that we face, but also use the law to our advantage, which we've done. And I'll give you examples, whether that's in combating boycotts, whether that's in standing up for Israel at the ICC, whether it's in stopping terror funding and so on, or working with students to empower them to fight anti-Semitism on campus. So the law really offers us also the opportunity to change this paradigm. And I think that's something that's very crucial in the fight for Israel and in combating the delegitimization of the Jewish state.
So let's talk about one of those forums which you mentioned, the United Nations. It's long been a hub of anti-Israel activity. Most recently, the UN HRC, the Human Rights Council, decided to establish a permanent commission of inquiry, a COI, to investigate the purported crimes which were committed during the May 2021 conflict. What is this commission of inquiry, and what can we expect to see from its investigation?
In terms of what we can expect, I can put it this way. We normally say there are only two things certain in life, death and taxes. And we can add a third, that Israel will always be found guilty before the United Nations, and none more so than at the UN Human Rights Council. This commission essentially was set up in the wake of the Operation Guardian of the Walls in May, when Hamas launched some thousands of rockets against Israel. And essentially, this commission, in which Israel is already found guilty at the outset, as we are before every commission and inquiry before this Human Rights Council, is mandated to look at crimes committed by both Israel, purportedly, and the Hamas. So from the very outset, what it does is that it equates Israel and Hamas on the same level, which is an absurdity, because what we saw was Hamas committing a double war crime, deliberately firing rockets at Israeli civilians whilst hiding behind Palestinian civilians. So it's not Israel that ought to be investigated. Israel was the one, as any sovereign country, the United States, any country in Europe, would be defending its citizens from this wanton aggression and terror. If the Human Rights Council truly wanted to conduct a proper inquiry, it would be investigating Hamas, it would be investigating Iran, who backs Hamas. But this is what we're dealing with at the Human Rights Council. It's this body which has passed almost more resolutions against the state of Israel than the entire world put together, countries which include Venezuela, which sit on it. Israel is the only country that has a permanent agenda item dedicated to us at the Human Rights Council. There is one item for Israel and then one for the entire world put together. So this commission, we know the outcome from the beginning, irrespective of what we say, they will find the Jewish state guilty of the simple crime of defending our citizens from Hamas.
So let's talk about another forum, the International Criminal Court, the ICC. Give us a little bit of background on some of the issues facing Israel in the ICC. What can be done going forward?
So, the ICC was created some 20 years ago for very honorable intentions. It was created to provide a legal forum to make sure that those who are accused of the most heinous crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes, to make sure that those who commit such crimes are investigated and are not immune. However, what we have seen, regrettably, and it only underscores the reasoning behind both Israel and the United States actually not joining the Rome Statute of the Criminal Court, is that what we have seen as a result of these investigations is that the court, which is meant to be a legal court, has become a politicized court, where instead of placing international law at the top of the pyramid, they've prioritized political concerns and essentially become a tool of Palestinian lawfare campaign against the Jewish state. And we saw that none more so than in the most recent announcement earlier in the year, where they announced an investigation against the Jewish state, against Israel, including for purported crimes committed simply, for defending ourselves against Hamas. So I think it really underscores the concerns that both we and the United States and others in the international community had with respect to the court. One of the primary concerns was, in this particular case, they found that the Palestinians are a state for the purposes of the Rome Statute, which legally is without any foundation. So that is very problematic. It has a real impact not only in Israel, it has an impact on the United States, it has an impact on any country that is out there fighting terror, in terms of our ability to be able to respond, to be able to defend our citizens, as any democracy, as any Western nation has a sovereign right to.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about social media, where you are a very vocal defender of the state of Israel. Tell us a little bit more from your work on social media. How can it be an effective tool? What do you see as the real way to leverage it and achieve meaningful change?
Sure. Look, the way I look at social media from two angles. On the one hand, we're fighting on all these different battlefronts: political, diplomatic, legal, as we are as well. But we're also fighting and active on the digital battlefront. Today, people, especially the younger generation, they get their news online. We see campaigns of hate, boycott campaigns spreading like wildfire. We see incitement against Israel, Holocaust distortion, and sheer hatred that is unfiltered online. So we need to be able to be there, to be able to respond to that, to be able to correct the lies and the mistruths, and I think that's crucial. But we also need to be online in order to provide an alternative narrative, a positive narrative of Israel, of what Israel means to us, of why it is important for Israel and the United States to enjoy this incredibly strong and important and crucial alliance. So we need to also be able to be there online and to make that case. We need to be able to make the case for Israel across all the battlefronts, across all the forums, including online, which is especially active where the younger generation is. But I think it's also crucial because it allows us to reach an audience that we could not have reached otherwise. And I think one of the best examples is through the Abraham Accords, which has allowed us to connect to our newfound friends and allies in the Arab world. So I think it plays really an instrumental role in that regard as well.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. The Abraham Accords, you formed some really remarkable relationships with thought leaders in the Arab world. Share more with us about some of the discussions which you've been having with such people, and how do you really see the ability of the Abraham Accords to bring significant change to the region?
Yeah. Look, first of all, I think the Abraham Accords have provided a paradigm shift to the region. I can start off with a personal example. The first group of Emiratis and Bahrainis that I met in December in 2020. It was still at the end of COVID, it was Hanukkah time. They came to Israel, the first ever delegation. They were brought here by the NGO Sharaka, and I went to meet them in Jerusalem. They were having dinner. And as I was sitting there at dinner with them. There was about 12 of them from UAE, Bahrain, men and women. I noticed they were engaged in this very heated discussion, debate, very polite but very heated, very animated. And dispersed in between this debate, they were asking each other, can you pass the food? Can you pass the drinks? And I thought to myself, they are just like us. This could be any Shabbat table anywhere in Israel, anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. So there was that immediate connection, so much so that when Israel was attacked by Hamas, and I found myself in the shelter, the first people to ask me, are you okay, were my new friends from the Emirates. The first ones, and that, I have to tell you, was so deeply meaningful, so deeply moving and powerful. So the bonds that have been formed, first and foremost, from my perspective, have been on a personal level, because the way I look at it as peace is very much like a flower. Our politicians, the diplomats, they're the ones that plant the seeds of peace, but then it's up to civil society, up to people, up to organizations like AIPAC, up to business leaders, communal leaders, cultural, educational leaders, to actually make this peace flourish and grow. And we have seen in the space of barely a year, it hasn't moved at an incremental pace, it has moved at a turbo pace. We have had embassies opened, we have had direct flights, we have had hundreds of millions of dollars in MOUs signed from across the political sphere. The expo has been opened recently in Dubai, with Israel proudly being one of the centerpieces of it. So it's truly changed, I think, the dynamic in so many ways. It has certainly put Israel on the map on the Middle East. And, you know, we spoke a little bit about the BDS and the boycotts as well. And, you know, the biggest breathtaking failure of the BDS movement is the fact that the Arab world is embracing us. It's reaching out to us. So we're forming these relationships first and foremost because it is in our strategic interest, not only to cooperate against common threats like Iran, but because ultimately it is a win-win situation. We win when we collaborate. We win when we cooperate for both people of Israel, the people of the Arab and the Gulf world, and, by the way, for the United States, which was instrumental in leading this paradigm shift, and today plays such an indispensable role in further advancing and supporting the Abraham Accords.
Well, that's an uplifting assessment and also a very personal, heartwarming story. So to conclude on a final note, as you mentioned, the U.S. Israel relationship, you as yourself being an Australian Israeli, a proud Zionist, and a staunch defender of the State of Israel, how do you see the U.S. Israel relationship, the importance of it, and the work that we do here in AIPAC?
I think the role of AIPAC in advancing, supporting, and championing the sacrosanct relationship, alliance between Israel and the United States is indispensable. And I'll give you one powerful example. Going back to the war in May, when I found myself with my wife and our two small children in the hallway of our building as rockets were raining down across Israel, and our house was shaking, including from the skies above with the rockets falling. And what saved us was the Iron Dome. And for that, I think we are certainly tremendously appreciative and grateful for the support, the extraordinarily bipartisan support within the United States Congress for the Iron Dome, as demonstrated, including recently with this overwhelming vote in support of replenishing these life-saving defense mechanisms, but primarily because of the role that I think AIPAC has played in advancing this and supporting this and putting this on the agenda, not only in Congress, but I think in the broader American public. And it shows also that you not only are out there supporting and advocating for Israel, but you do so also because it is first and foremost in the national self-interest of the United States for there to be not only a strong Israel, but a strong, vibrant relationship and alliance between the State of Israel and the United States.
Well, thank you, and also thank you for the important work that you are doing through social media and with the International Legal Forum. Arsen, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and we appreciated your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.